The Mission Impossible series is one of the most consistent movie series of the past 25, 30 years. The quality level is fairly consistent. I can't say there's a single bad Mission Impossible movie. But having said that, Mission Impossible 3 may be my personal least favorite. Now, I've only seen it once or twice before a few days ago when I decided watching Netflix to go ahead and watch it again. I didn't have a lot of reviews for the stream. Maybe I'll check it out. And so I did. And as I started to watch it, I started wondering why I didn't like it because it starts off really well. Anyway, I watched the whole thing. And after watching it, I've decided to do what I like to call a deep dive into Mission Impossible 3. Now, why a deep dive? It's well, I want to go through and talk about just about every major scene slash sequence in the movie, discuss what I liked and didn't like about it. Ultimately, I'll give it a grade at the end, but I want to really go into it, share the full story and plot, not worry about spoilers, which I do for any new movies. This movie's over a decade old and it's in the middle of a series. So either you've never seen any Mission Impossible, in which case you're not watching reviews of random sequels to it, or you've seen all 7 of them and you've long since seen this. And I'm just curious about what I thought about Mission Impossible 3. So I assume you're in the latter category, and we're going to go with that. First, like with all my other reviews, I like to go through the pedigree. Who made this movie? Well, it's the first movie where kind of Tom Cruise kind of connected the production of the movies with Bad Robot, which is J.J. Abrams' production company. J.J. Abrams directed it, and I mean, you watch it, you can see a lot of the things he likes to do in it. Kind of a little bit of lens flare stuff, not a ton, not as much as like Star Trek. Some of the lens flare stuff, but his direction is very pristine looking, a lot of very impressive visuals. And that's certainly true in Mission Impossible 3. That's J.J. Abrams. The writing team is kind of the Bad Robot gang. That is J.J. Abrams, but primarily Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orci. I also sometimes like to talk about the cast of the movie. This one, Tom Cruise is awesome. He's an excellent action actor, as well as actor and other things he does, but he plays this role of Ethan Hunt very well. I thought they made some interesting writing decisions about the story for him. We'll get to that, but he does a great job. Everybody is good. Simon Pegg is introduced in this one. He makes the most of it. It's clear why he kind of started getting reused in the later movies, later sequels. He did an excellent job. My man, whose name I can't remember, who plays Luther, is really good in it. His name is out. I can't get his name is out in my head right now. Ving Rhames. Ving Rhames is in it. He's really good as usual. They actually give him a fair amount of stuff to just do some good moments with Ethan Hunt's character. We'll talk about those in a minute. But he's good in this. Philip Seymour Hoffman's the villain. He's good, although they don't use him that much. He seems like almost a placeholder villain. Like they put him there and said, just be cool and mean. And that's what he did. But he didn't really have a lot to the character. And I doubt they gave him any backstory. He just kind of played him as generally menacing. And I mean, he's a great actor and he did a good job. But we never really find out much about his character. He's just a generally menacing arms broker that, is this extremely dangerous guy. So Mission Impossible 3 starts off with Ethan subdued in a room with his now wife. We don't know exactly. I think we know that it's his girl. I don't know if they say explicitly that's his wife or not, but that this is his significant other. And the villain is trying to get him to tell him where the rabbit's foot is. The rabbit's foot is the MacGuffin of this movie, and the movie very much treats it like a MacGuffin. We never really learn for sure what it is. There's a little snide comment at the end about it where they kind of tease they're going to tell us, but then they don't. Simon Pegg gives an example of what it could be or might be as some thing that will end the world, but we don't really know. We're left to only see it as a plot device, a menacing plot device. So he's asking him about that. The dialogue doesn't entirely make sense to us, so they're setting up a good mystery box. We don't know exactly why Ethan's saying what he's saying, why the villain is saying, Philip Seymour Hoffman, who I'm just going to call him that because I don't remember the villain's name, why he's saying what he's saying, and then ultimately we're left with a gunshot to end the teaser. The opening credits happen, and then we see home life with Ethan and his new fiance. We see what kind of situation is with them. They're living together. He's semi-retired. They kind of explain a lot of stuff in the course of the dialogue. And There's also interspersed with that, kind of think before and after, he goes to a convenience store and meets up with an agent who tries to pull him back in. There, I think we learn actually more details about his connection with the Impossible Mission Force at that point. And they kind of have this kind of brief discussion, and we get the mission told to us, the initial mission that kind of incites the action of the movie. That's all done fairly well, pulls you in. I think they do a good job with it. Pretty soon after that, we get the first set piece, and this is Ethan attempting to extract one of his, I think it's first pupil from a location, a safe house, or some fortress, or some building that's being guarded, played by Keri Russell. And it's more of an action scene than an IMF or Mission Impossible type of adventure. There's not a lot of trickeration going on. It's setting up guns, Ethan running around, being an action hero, doing that kind of stuff. But it's a really fun scene. I can't really complain about it. It's cool and exciting. I think it goes on for about the right length. Some action scenes overdo their welcome. I think one later in the movie does that a little bit. But this one, very good. No real complaints. After that's over, we get what I think is the first real misstep of the movie. And that's when we get back to IMF headquarters. Now, I believe this is the only time in all 7 movies, or the only movie of all 7 movies, where we actually see an IMF headquarters. And for me, I remember viscerally not liking it when I first saw the movie, thinking this so demystified the idea of IMF. IMF was always these guys out in the field, they're kind of disconnected from, we know they kind of work for the United States, but they're getting these missions where they're kind of floating out there in the ether, and we send them stuff that nobody else can take care of, that they're impossible to do, so we're sending you to do it. That's the whole concept kind of Mission Impossible. This one kind of turns into a branch of the CIA. I mean, they don't say that. They don't say how they're connected to the federal government, but they're below like a post office or something. I don't think it's exactly a post office, but something like a post office. It's like a Department of Interior building or something, but they're just part of it make it seem like IMF is just part of American bureaucracy, which I guess everything ultimately is. But this is a movie, and I didn't like the idea of turning the IMF into this general bureaucracy with bosses and middle managers and all this kind of, and all these technicians and all these people. I'm like, aren't these supposed to be men of mystery? Like Ethan Hunt and all the people he works with, they're from the far corners of the world coming together to do special things. And in Mission Impossible 3, they're just a bunch of employees of the federal government that I guess were ex-cons that you'll get hired to do whatever jobs they tell them to do. So it demystified it. Also, I didn't think, they introduced Lawrence Fishburne, who does a good job, but they introduced him as the kind of the boss of the IMF and the I think executive director, whatever they call him. And he's chewing everybody out. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, he's retired. He didn't ask to do this. He did this as a favor to the other guy, and he's getting reamed out by this guy for doing a bad job of the mission. Well, Ethan didn't decide what the mission was. He's given the mission on the little funny camera that explodes. Why is he getting all this flack from this guy for not executing as perfectly as Lawrence Fishburne would like it done? So I'm doing too many air quotes in the stream, but that bugged me too. That's like he had to do that because it was like part of the story that Lawrence Fishburne is antagonistic. So when he becomes a suspect, we don't like him. We want to believe him. So it's setting up a red herring, but it felt a little bit unfair. And again, I didn't like the whole idea of the IMF is just another bureaucracy. So then there's the funeral with the quick scene where they're trying to sell us some more about how important Keri Russell was to Tom Cruise. Of course, she dies. So that whole sequence, I guess the story. I don't have to explain everything that happens if it's not relevant to the critique, but she dies, and man, the face she makes when the thing explodes in her brain, that's really good. That really sells that, man, she's instantly dead. And it's creepy, and it really works, and it really sells you on how dangerous a weapon it is. So kudos for that. Anyway, she's dead. It's her funeral. They're all there, and Ethan has this flashback, and I don't know if they're just trying to fill a few minutes of the funeral so it won't be boring, but it's showing him training her and stuff. And I'm like, we already know she was important to him. He came out of retirement, he's like risk messing up his relationship with this woman to do it. Obviously, it's important to him. So I thought that was kind of odd that they seem to feel the need to do that. So again, that kind of felt like there's something that got put into the movie for maybe movie reasons, but didn't seem to need to be there for any practical reasons. After the funeral, he goes to her house, and he opens up her mail, and he checks her mail, and he checks his mail. Maybe it's a drop. I don't remember, but he gets a mail, and that has a little dot on the stamp, and that thing gets them the recording that he has a conversation with Luther, Luther's like, hey man, like you seem to really be tripping over this girl, man, when you was messing with her. I thought it was a really cool scene between him and Luther. One of the best kind of moments between IMF agents in the movie, along with I think some of the Simon Pegg, Ethan stuff was kind of cool. So I thought that was good. There's also a later Luther scene, I'll say it now, with him where he's like telling them, like, man, don't marry this woman. You're gonna mess up her life. And he's like, I already married her. It's like, oh, congratulations. Great moment, great character moment. Anyway, so they're arguing about this dot. Ethan, of course, somehow knows more about more technology than Luther does. Like, why don't you use the dot? Why don't you use a magnetic? Maybe it's a magnetic dot. Luther's like, oh, it's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. I'm like, Luther's the technical expert. Why is Ethan coming up with this? But regardless, that's fine. It doesn't really bother me. It's just you watch it and you're thinking, man, it's like, can't Luther figure something out? But anyway, so that's that scene. And then they go to the mystery dot. They go to back to IMF headquarters, and Simon Pegg is there. They introduce him. He's cool, fun stuff. Gets a little bit of dialogue. He kind of gives his explanation about what the rabbit foot might be, which is creepy, and it kind of works for the movie. As I said, I got a little bugaboo about the fact that it's just a MacGuffin and they don't really explain it, and they kind of wink at you at the end of the movie about how they're not going to tell you what it is. But the explanation Simon Pegg gives for it is a pretty good explanation, and I think kind of carries it enough that it isn't really a problem that we don't know. But I think it's kind of a wink to us at the end. And they're like, oh, we're not going to tell you what it actually is. So we're going to leave it to your imagination. After that, he marries his wife and he goes after the plot's kind of in place. They know what they're going to do. They got the opportunity to go pick up the bad guy, kidnap him in Rome. So he's going to go and he goes to the hospital to say goodbye to her, but not a real goodbye. And she kind of detects it and says, why don't we get married? Again, a good scene. These are good scenes. This movie so far is pretty good. I don't like the IMF bureaucracy, but besides that, it's a good movie. And I'm seeing good scene after good scene. That one's got a lot of good subtext. They decide to go ahead and get married. And that's how that scene plays out. Then we get to the best Mission Impossible or IMF sequence in the movie, the kidnapping of the villain. And it feels like a Mission Impossible movie. It's the most Mission Impossible part of the entire film. And the only critique I have of it is it goes a little too much to plan. There isn't a ton of angst about what's going to happen. There's a brief moment where the voice thing doesn't work on his throat. And then there's the thing where the head is taking a long time to generate. But and the problem with that I had is like, didn't you all know how long the head takes? Why is it? But I guess there are things out of their control. So it's understandable. But again, those are the only two things. Everything else goes exactly the same. The broken down truck, the infiltration to hop over the wall, the sneaking through the building, all the other stuff, the spill of the drink, all the other stuff goes to plan. And that's fine. As I said, IMF scene can work when it goes mostly to plan. But when that's the only really big Mission Impossible IMF scene in the movie, I'll just say Mission Impossible. I keep on saying both. That's the only Mission Impossible like moment in the movie. You want to get the most out of it. Where some of the other ones will have 3 and 4 scenes like that. This one has 1. The other 2, most of the rest of the sequences are action scenes, as we'll discuss further. So that goes well. If I was ranking Mission Impossible sequences, that one would rank somewhere in there. It's pretty good. After that, we have, for me, the second misstep of this movie, and that's the airplane interrogation. Now, as a person who knows a fair amount about movies and seen a lot of them, I understand that they kind of need for the villain to get under Ethan's skin and to really intimidate Ethan in order to create the tension that kind of carries through the rest of the movie and kind of creates the issue between them that they have to resolve at the end. Having said that, it's not clear to me why Ethan let some random dude, some random crook that they picked up. I mean, he's powerful, but so are all the guys that IMF deals with. It's not like most of them are everyday thugs and then suddenly the Joker or the Penguin. They're all the Joker or the Penguin, to use Batman villains. They're all these big time bad guys. Why does this one saying just a few words like, hey, you got anybody you love? Well, I'm going to go after them. Well, everybody says that when they're supervillains. It's common superhero. And Ethan loses it, almost dumps the guy out of the airplane. And, and Luther's losing it. He kind of says Ethan's name when he shouldn't because he's so rattled by Ethan's behavior, which lets you know Ethan's not planning this. He's really out of control. And that's the other problem I have. Ethan's never out of control. Ethan's the guy that stays in control when everything everywhere is going to SHIT. He's the guy in all the Mission Impossible sequences that stays cool while everybody around him, his crew, is freaking out and trying to keep him alive. He's a dude jumping out of airplanes. He's a guy that has no fear. And suddenly, in this moment, this guy says a couple words to him and he loses his ish. I think that, of course, the writers would say, and the filmmakers would say, well, these feelings he has for this woman are different than anything else. And even he gets rattled. Okay. But for me, it's out of character for this character as he's been and as he would be going forward, with some exception, I think, in Dead Reckoning much later on. We see a little more emotion than usual there too. But this is the most unhinged we ever really see Ethan Hunt. And to me, it doesn't quite work and seems a little bit unearned. Like the bad guy didn't say or do enough, or they didn't give a background on him to convince me that Ethan should have been as rattled as he was, because he perceived the threat is too real, I guess I'm saying. So that's my issue a little bit with that particular scene. It's shot well and everything. I mean, J.J. Abrams is a good director, and almost every scene is shot well. If anything, he overdoes it a bit with the lighting. It's almost too dynamic, too varied in color. But generally, you want movies to feel bright and energetic. So I didn't mind it. You know, he can direct any Mission Impossible movie. I just might want the writers to be some different guys. The next scene is the breakout scene where the villain is freed by masked men with guns and helicopters and missiles and drones and such. And that scene's a fun action scene. I thought it went on a little bit too long, but the only reason why I say that is because the trailers kind of ruin that part of the movie. The trailers reveal that, you know, Ethan's got this villain and that the villain is kind of going to get released, I believe. So you're watching it, you never feel like, well, I'll say this. It's not even about the trailer. Let me take that back. No movie is going to have a villain get captured and then have an escape attempt that fails. So you know he's going to escape if once the attempt occurs. You know it's going to happen. And especially with all of the teases the movie makes about the danger that he might be putting family and friends in, you know that's going to happen. The last scene was a guy taunting him, and then they're about to break him out. So of course he's going to successfully break out, and of course she's going to be in danger. It kind of like the movie is, everything is telling you that. So because of that, some of Ethan's heroics later on, you're like, Ethan, man, just give it up, man. He's going to get away because the movie needs it. So like he goes, he gets the gun out of the car, he puts the gun together, and then he starts shooting at him until he runs out of bullets. Like he's not going to get him. I know he's not going to get him. So it looks exciting. And the first part of it, I think, is legitimately with the missiles. But once he's putting the gun together and he's trying to shoot at him, you know he's not going to hit him. It's not that bad. But it was just one of those moments that just doesn't connect because the story doesn't really let it anymore, because you already know too much about what's going on. Oh, yeah. After that scene, Ethan's trying to contact his wife to let her know she's in danger, because obviously the supervillain that's now escaped is going to come after his wife like he promised in the airplane. So he's sitting there, he's driving cars crazy, he's making phone calls, he's getting transferred to different parts of the hospital. And of course, there's a villain already there to kidnap her. Now, you can say, devil's advocate, well, we know there's the corrupt guy in the IMF, so maybe they're the ones that actually sent the person to get his wife. But nobody actually says that in the movie. And there's no real suggestion that it's anybody but him. So how does Ethan get behind the 8 ball compared to the villain in the movie? Like, how does the villain get rescued? The moment the villain's rescued, the first thing Ethan thinks is, my wife's in danger, and calls the hospital. Can't reach her. They transfer him. Can't reach her. Meanwhile, there's already a villain at the hospital waiting to kidnap her. How does he do that? How does he even know who Ethan is at that point? He didn't know him before he escaped. He couldn't have set that plan in motion before he was captured, because at that point, he didn't have any beef with Ethan. Ethan hadn't kidnapped him yet. So how in the world does that guy end up at that hospital? At the same time, Ethan's calling from the bridge that got blown up as the guy was being targeted. It's hard not to ignore something that obvious going on. It just seems like it has to happen because it's a movie, but the timing of it just doesn't make any sense to me. It feels like she has to be in danger because she is, and they don't bother to explain to you how the villain somehow got her before Ethan could get her. Even though Ethan supposedly has these people, he can't call someone else at the hospital and be like, hey, go get my wife, she's in danger. He doesn't have any agents. So when he gets to the hospital, they capture him. So there are agents around. Lawrence Fishburne captures him. And that brings us to the next problem, which is Lawrence Fishburne. At this point in the movie, we're supposed to think Lawrence Fishburne's the number one suspect based on the video from the dot. Okay. Then the problem becomes, if Lawrence Fishburne is on the side of the supervillain, then he shouldn't want to capture Ethan Hunt. He should want to let him go because the villain now is going to tell Ethan to go get the rabbit's foot. So as soon as Lawrence Fishburne arrests him and puts him in in prisons him in IMF headquarters again, we know that Ethan, we should know that he's not the villain. Because if he was, he wouldn't have done that. Instead, the guy that helps him escape, if you think about it for a moment, is the villain. Although I admit, when I'm watching it, I'm not thinking about all this. All I'm thinking is, why would Lawrence Fishburne, if he's the bad guy, be trying to catch him? But they did sell really well that guy was his friend. And so that betrayal did catch me a little bit off guard. Once he gave him the weapon, once he gave him the thing to help him, the knife to help him escape, I said, it's probably him. But I thought it just intellectually. I didn't really believe it. And then he actually does it. I'm like, dang, he was the bad guy. That's how long it's been since I watched this movie. I forgot that guy was the actual, was the turncoat. But the logic of the movie works that way. And it's fun to be able to follow along and for it to kind of make sense. But it also is kind of a tell. So, at this point, we're in like the end of the second, beginning of third act. So this all is okay. Nothing wrong with the fact that this logically, it doesn't make sense for Lawrence Fishburne. But I do think it's illogical that he wasn't able to get to his wife, or nobody was able to get to his wife before the supervillain could. That was not logical. But Lawrence Fishburne capturing him was, and I like when movies actually make sense within their own logic. And it makes perfect sense for Lawrence Fishburne to capture him. What they never explain is why they have a mask on him like he's Hannibal Lecter. I remember when I first saw it thinking that, like, why does he have a mask? Nobody explains it. I guess they won't want him to say any lies, but it feels like, again, because it's a movie, he can't tell Lawrence Fishburne, you're a traitor, because then Lawrence Fishburne would think, well, I know I'm not a traitor, so it means somebody else here is. So who's the traitor? And he would start an investigation. So Ethan has to be muzzled so that nobody can find out what Ethan knows. Even though if you're head of the IMF, you want to know why Ethan's doing what he's doing. Why would you want him muzzled? So the muzzle doesn't make sense either. And it's kind of silly, to be honest. And there's no explanation given for why he's muzzled. He just is. He just has a muzzle on. Nobody says why. He just covered up his face. Face is all covered with leather. So who knows? So then we've got prep for what would be the last Mission Impossible mission, which is to steal the rabbit's foot from, I think it's a building in China. So Ethan figures out some crazy way to like use something as like a pendulum to swing him around and throw him onto the building. Meanwhile, they use like baseballs to distract the guys until Ethan can land on the building. And then while he's sliding down a 45-degree incline, shoot two guys with precision shots while he's sliding at, I don't know, 30 miles an hour, whatever speed it is. It's pretty ridiculous. It doesn't really bother me, but even in a Mission Impossible movie, those two perfect shots, which were key to the thing, because if he misses either of them, they set the alarms. Getting the rabbit's foot becomes very difficult to do. So he has to make both of those crazy shots the first time. He doesn't get a second chance. So knowing that, it made it seem a little more ridiculous to me. So he shoots both of those guys, then almost slides off the edge to his death, but manages to catch the, I don't know, whatever girder. I don't know if that was a rain duct. I don't know what it was, but he catches himself. And then he disappears. Next thing you know, he's hopping out of the building and the mission's over. And that seemed kind of like a cop-out. Like the writers didn't want to bother to write a whole nother Mission Impossible sequence. So they just came up with how he gets to the building and they just stop there. And then they have like a chase scene afterward that seemed kind of extraneous. Like they're not going to catch Ethan Hunt at this point in Shanghai with the rabbit's foot. He's going to escape. So that seemed like an extraneous chase scene at that point. But anyway, there's a little chase scene at the end that to me was not necessary. He gets away. That's that scene. They call the supervillain. He says, okay, come to this location. And the rest of the team says, well, okay, Ethan, good luck with handing over that rabbit's foot to the supervillain. And I'm thinking, I thought you all were Mission Impossible. This was the Impossible Mission Force. Why are you all giving up and just letting Ethan give himself up without any contingency plan whatsoever? They have no contingency plan. There's no tracker on him. There's no we'll use a drone to watch the car as you travel. Nothing. They're just, hey, Ethan, good luck, man. Check you later, man. Luther, give him a pound. Or maybe he did. I don't know if he did or not. And they just leave. And I'm just in there thinking, like, wouldn't you have a plan? Do something. Some idea. Even if it wouldn't work. Even if they say, we lost him. They don't even do that. There's just no even attempt at having a plan when Ethan gives himself up. He just gives himself up. He drinks his potion and knocks him out. He wakes up, and then we're back to the first scene, the teaser, and the teaser connects back to the movie. And that scene still plays out really well. They managed not to reiterate too much, and plays out. That works fine. And at some point, he's injected with the thing himself. I want to say in the teaser, they actually say the bomb's already in his head. But then later in the movie, I think they messed that up. They show him getting it shot into his head. Maybe that's before the teaser moment. I'm not sure. When I was watching it, I felt like those things might have contradicted each other. It doesn't really matter. Those might have contradicted each other. But anyway, he has it in his head. They have that sequence. And then the other guy comes in. It's revealed who the turncoat is. And the guy gets super close to Ethan. Ethan pulls gets the pin out and gets the thing out and kill. Like, I think he doesn't kill him. He knocks him out with the pin, and he escapes. And then he escapes the building pretty easily. Once he subdues the IMF trader, he escapes pretty easily. He contacts Simon Pegg, who leads him to the other safe house. He gets to the other safe house. At first he beats up one guy, and then he beats up the supervillain pretty easily because he's got a fat guy, out of shape guy. He's like no contest, understandably. And he starts freeing his wife, and then Philip Seymour Hoffman activates the bomb. They have like a fist fight, and he's got like a bad headache from the bomb, which for some reason gives him 4 minutes to survive. I don't understand why you would have a bomb that only has a 4-minute timer. You don't have another option to have it just blow up right away. But they don't. He gets 4 minutes to fight. So they have a less than 4-minute fight where he ultimately dumps Philip Seymour Hoffman's character out to get hit by a bus and get killed. It's very kind of, what's that term I'm looking for? It felt not inconclusive. What's that word for when you want something big and momentous to happen and it lets you down? And for the ending of this supervillain to just be, they roll out onto the street while tussling, and Ethan's on his bottom, and the other guy on the top, and the car just hits him. Anticlimactic. That's the word. It's anticlimactic. And he hits him, and then he comes back in. They got to shock him to get the thing out of his head. So they do that. His wife does. And then she has a little wife using a gun moment, which is kind of cool. That's actually the best part of this whole sequence I'm telling you about. The best part of it is when she has to try to fend off the villains with her gun. She has to remember what Ethan told her, and that works really well. That's the best part of this whole sequence. And then she uses CPR. She gets him back up. They go back to IMF headquarters. They have a little moment between Ethan and the director. They'll comment about the rabbit's foot. We're not going to tell you what it is. I'll only tell you if you stay. Ethan's like, no, thanks. I don't really care. I'd rather go on vacation, do a honeymoon. And then it's kind of a yo-jo moment with all of the members of the team at the end. And that's the end of the movie. I went through all that kind of quickly to kind of give you the last half hour in a quick succession, because that's the third act of this movie. The third act of a Mission Impossible movie consists of a half-done Mission Impossible sequence, or you might consider at the end of the second act, whatever, that, and then a dramatic moment, a brief tussle, a sequence of like 5 minutes of Tom Cruise running through the streets of a small town in China. Or is it China, or is it like Taiwan? Whatever, it's a small Asian country. He's running through the street. I think it's China, but he's running through the streets, and then he has a brief fist fight with the supervillain, and then the movie's over. That's it. That's the end of this Mission Impossible movie. And I think that was why I came away from the movie being so let down, because you have some earlier parts. The setup is really good. You've got a good middle of the movie set piece, I think. As I said, there's not enough to me danger to be your only Mission Impossible set piece, but it really is the only one. And then you have a bunch of like generic kind of action stuff for the rest of the movie. And I think that was, to me, the biggest problem, is it felt the least like a Mission Impossible movie, even less than 2, which felt like a John Woo movie as much as anything else. Even that felt as much, if not more, of a Mission Impossible movie than this one did, because it had more of the intrigue and stuff working for it, even though the set pieces weren't nearly as elaborate. But, it felt like a movie that, it felt like the Mission Impossible was more like a general Tom Cruise vehicle, instead of, even though it had good moments for some of the other cast members, rather than being about the concept of Mission Impossible. And that's why I like 4 better, and 5. Those felt more, even though 5 felt like an espionage movie as much as a Mission Impossible movie, still felt more like Mission Impossible movies and had better third acts. That's the fatal flaw of Mission Impossible 3 for me, is the third act just isn't very strong and it's a letdown from the rest of the movie. So for me, Mission Impossible 3 is one of the ones I wouldn't recommend. I give it a 6 out of 10. I wouldn't recommend it, but I still enjoyed a fair amount of it. I'm not gonna front on you and say it's terrible. As I said, this movie series is really good. I think they're all at least sixes, sixes, sevens, or eights, all of them, and they're all very good. And Tom Cruise, as a role as producer, has done a good job of stewarding the franchise and never really letting it get too far off track. That's my deep dive into Mission Impossible 3. I hope you got some enjoyment out of it. Maybe I said some things you hadn't heard before about the movie. And if you got this far, please consider liking and subscribing. Trying to build my small channel. And really hope that some people can enjoy these videos and give me feedback. If you thought, oh, it's pretty good, but maybe you could do this better or do that better, give me some feedback. I have a stream on Mondays in the evening Pacific time. If you'd like to come and talk to me about movies, that's the idea for that stream. I make content for it, but that's low priority. I can do a stream later in the week for content. My main focus is to have a day every week that's for viewers of my content to come talk to me about movies if that's what they want to do. Anyway, thanks for watching Low Key Classic Movies.